All right, Eric, welcome, man. I appreciate you coming here. I know we've been back and forth on Twitter planning this a little bit.
And I appreciate you having me on, man.
Yeah, man. And I think you and I connected as far back as June when I did
I think
Florida,
so.
Yeah, the Florida model for you.
Yeah, June sounds right.
Yeah, we built I built a model off registered.
That was back when Biden was in the race, man.
Yeah, and we had Trump up. Oh man, it was anywhere from like I want to say it was 11 points.
It was 11, yeah.
Yeah, up to 15, I think it was, and I think it fell like 11.7 or 12.3, and that was based off voter registration, voting trends, turnout, the whole nine, and certainly South Florida. And that was a fun work, and you got it posted at your website, sent us a lot of traffic, and then old Body Buy drops out and kind of
dropped out.
Throws the water on that. So, but anyway, man, we've been following you on Twitter, and I've seen you pivot and just kind of grow your account. You're putting out a lot of good content. You seem to be connected here at various places with, different news sources and things of that nature, which is a wonderful addition, a breath of fresh air on this election Twitter side. So,
yeah.
Well, look, go ahead and tell me, I know you work for an outfit in Florida. Give me a little bit and let everybody else know as well who we're talking to and what it is that you do.
Yeah, my name's Eric Daugherty. I'm the assistant news director for Florida's Voice. So that's kind of my day job. That's kind of what I do most of the day. You might not think that based on my account, but my main thing is being an objective Florida journalist. So I'm kind of just a lot of boring stuff, but also a lot of exciting stuff. I mean, we have Governor Ron DeSantis down here, so he's half the fun much of the time. Just kind of covering the state, nothing too special. After the summer, once election season really kicked up, after what happened in Pennsylvania and Butler with Trump, everyone knows what happened there. I kind of deviated away from just strictly focusing on that, and I've always been a Trump supporter. I haven't been this vocal about it, but I kind of just got going after that. I was pissed off. I was also fired up though, and I was kind of ready to just really delve in to not just the superficial like election stuff, but really digging into the polls. And now, as I'm sure we'll talk about today, getting into, we have an election month now. We have 2 election months now, right? It isn't just election day. And so I was ready to get going on that. We did a lot of primary coverage, which there are some things we can talk about there that I think might be interesting. But yeah, I'm excited to get going on this and talk about where things are at, man.
No, man, great intro. Thank you so much. Yeah, no, as I said, you've been putting out a lot of good content. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on here as my very first guest to kick this off, the margin of error. So we're going to move forward with some good, hard-hitting election analysis here, or at least some speculation. We've got a lot of different data. You've been deep into the early voting tabulations and calculations. We're seeing patterns that do not match up 2020 at all. In fact, it may even mirror what Gallup is putting out, and I think Pew as well. They're looking at an R+ environment. It may not be that way. Then again, it may be that way. I know it fluctuates from month to month, but as you said, we're getting really close to the election. This is the first month of the election, right, with all the early voting. Right. So let's dive into it. Let's talk about. Let's put Florida to the side for just 1 second, because it may not be that uber competitive.
Yeah.
Is the word competitive allows here, but 5 or 6, 7 or 8 points, maybe not be so competitive. But if we look at North Carolina and certainly Virginia, can you just walk us through what you've been collecting, what you've been aggregating, who you've been talking to without, you don't have to drop names, but what are you seeing? What's on the ground, factually speaking, versus where we were in 2020, and what does that mean for election day in your opinion?
Yeah, so 2 very separate scenarios here between Virginia and North Carolina. So the problem with Virginia, which I'm going to get into second, because that's a little bit more speculative. North Carolina, we have the party registration of the people who are requesting mail-in ballots. So mail-in ballot requests. So we're comparing those to 2020, pandemic year, and 2022, just to kind of get it, and then that's a midterm year, just to kind of get a mix of, hey, where were things in the last presidential election, and where were things in the midterm, right? And so when you're looking at North Carolina, no one has voted yet. I want to start off by saying no one has voted yet, right? There are trends, keyword, and you said pattern. Pattern is the keyword here. Nothing has actually, happened in North Carolina yet. There are things happening that are not good for Democrats. And so I'll go ahead and just rip the Band-Aid off here. At this point in, I believe, 2020, I believe the margin was closer to Democrats were 11 points ahead of where they are right now. And Republicans were about 5 points behind where they are right now. So 11 plus 5, that's 16. So you compare back to 2020, Republicans by mail, now this is just requesting ballots, right? No one's voted yet. 16 points. D minus 11, R minus 6. So you think about that and you're like, if you're a Democrat, is that really encouraging, right? Is that something that exudes energy from Kamala Harris? She's at the top of the ticket. Donald Trump is at the top of the Republican ticket, right?
Yep.
In 2022, which I'm going to bring up because it wasn't a pandemic year, I only have final for this, not year to date, but the final, Democrats are still behind the final 2022 by, it looks like 8 points. So 8 points, Republicans are ahead by 6 points, 14 points, right? It's not that far off from where you are from 2020. And the reason I make both of those comparisons, so 16 from 2020, around 14 from 2022 final, it doesn't matter if it was a pandemic year, midterm year, right? Mail is just redder across the board. Doesn't matter what you compare it to. Now, could there be some crazy 2008 style event where all the Democrats are going to be much more energized and they're going to return at, a 30% higher rate than Republicans, and which means they're going to return more ballots at a higher rate? It's always possible, but remember, we're talking about patterns, right? We're talking about likelihoods. We're talking about where do you want to be if you're Kamala Harris right now? If you are 15, 16 points behind where you're at, 14 points behind, I think that the case is just factually compelling that North Carolina is looking really disastrous. And I've spoken, I'm not going to name names, but I've spoken with people who do this data stuff for a living, do this early voting stuff, have far more expertise than me. I'm just looking at it, right? I wasn't around here tracking all this stuff over the past 4 years. Like I said, my thing's Florida. We're talking about North Carolina, right? But even this person I spoke to was like, and this is a very nonpartisan, not Democrat, not Republican. They're like, if I'm a North Carolina Democrat, I'm not liking what I'm seeing. And if I'm Kamala Harris, I'm hoping that this doesn't, trend across the country. So in summary, North Carolina, the mail is a lot more red, but there is still time, and there are two opportunities for Democrats. One, can they outdo the Republicans in return rates? They can make up some ground if they return at a higher rate than Republicans. Their big Hail Mary, though, is going to be in-person early voting. That begins, I think, October 16th or 24th. It was one of those days.
Yeah. North
Carolina Democrats, that is basically their big day. That's their big comeback. Can they come out? I don't know what margin they have to come out of. I'll have to look into that. We're almost I think 3 weeks out from that. So there's still time. But North Carolina is looking more and more like there's going to be a hole that Democrats can't dig themselves out of. Now, that doesn't mean Kamala Harris has just lost the state of North Carolina. Donald Trump has won it. That hasn't happened anywhere, right? That's not what the point of comparing this data is for. And I want to caution, even conservatives who are, and I myself included, excited to see this data. You still got to wait. You can be excited about the fact that Republicans are so far ahead, but it means that it has to continue, right? So that's a trend, right, that is continuing every day. So mail is getting redder, and I'm sure you see my account every day. It's getting redder, both in Pennsylvania and North Carolina. I'm looking at it every day.
Yep.
Republicans have gained 2.5 points in the mail from September 7th. We're at the 26th, so 2 points. Democrats have lost, it looks like, 3 points in the mail, and that's just in the past 2 weeks, right?
And what's are you talking about collectively, or what state have they gained 2 points?
In North Carolina, because that's the only one where we had a party. Yeah. Yeah, so the comparison where we're at right now is already really bad, and the trend is also in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
So yeah, North Carolina. We can get into Virginia next, but just trying to separate those two because we have a lot more of a complete. It still isn't even that complete, but we have more of a concise picture in North Carolina.
Yeah, and I'll tell you about some things about North Carolina. When I dropped that poll in North Carolina, right before, a matter of fact, yeah, I retweeted you. Yeah, I remember that actually. But anyway, right before we dropped the poll, or the week we were polling, there had been 2 or 3 polls come out consecutively before us that were showing Harris up +2, +3. Maybe there was a +4 poll, but I'm certain there was 2 +3 polls back to back. And then when I pulled it, man, I just didn't see it. I didn't see it. In fact, it was the opposite. I had it Trump +1.7, but as I stated, I missed some Trump voters, and I know what some of the counties and I know what the regions were I missed him, and I knew that for a fact that I missed some Trump voters.
You're probably not the only one.
Well, but that's why I had it at a 1.7, and then when I added some commentary to that, I said I want to poll this state again. There's some things here I missed, and no poll is perfect. There's issues with my Nevada poll. There's issues with every poll, and that's why you get these crazy crosstabs. None of them are matching each other. Like Echelon comes out or CNN comes out. Everyone's crosstabs is different. Focal Data had Kamala winning the Hispanic vote in Nevada like 82-18.
Yeah,
that's a ridiculous margin. That's not
looks
even
like a typo to me.
It's so something's going on. But in any case, and I said, look, man, I think Trump is up 3 points in this state pretty easy. The data shows it. The demographics show it. I could tell by the way things were voting. And then, lo and behold, later that evening, Trafalgar and another pollster come out like that evening and show Trump up 2, Trump up 3. And then ever since then, we've had consecutive polls showing Trump +2, Trump +3. And I even had a +4 poll came out like a couple of days ago. So there's been a little bit of a trend. I hope, the polls that we've dropped sometimes, like we dropped the Virginia poll, we had it +3 for Harris. All right.
And that's what Rasmussen has.
Yeah. Well, I didn't, well, I haven't been on Twitter looking at the polling, but we dropped that at the end of August and we got some serious blowback for that. I mean, we got hated for that. And I was skeptical too, man. I was nervous posting that poll, but I went over that and over that. And the partner I had, he runs SPSS, and we pumped it back through it again. That's like, man, this looks crazy. But we had to go with the data, so we dropped the +3 poll, and then Roanoke, I guess earlier in that week, I can't recall, they had or maybe earlier in the month, I don't remember now. They had a +3 poll, and I didn't really think much about it, but now here we are a month later. There's been a couple of +3 and +4 polls, so. We've just been lucky in how we fall, and the other polls come out behind us, and it, kind of makes me feel a little better, I guess I'm saying. So we had the Nevada him up in Nevada by 1 point. Again, that's another poll that Trump could be running better than that, and I'll explain that in a little bit. So, and I'm going somewhere with this. So it looks like, there's a lot of circumstantial things going on, on the peripheral. So we got, like I said, we got the Gallup tracker of the adults showing with leaners there. That's going to be, looks like an R+ environment. Then you're getting this mail-in ballots. I don't want to participate in, cognitive bias or, anything like that. But there are some good signs pointing to at least a good Republican turnout, as well as, maybe a Democrat turnout. But I don't know, but there's just some things here just pointing me towards this is going to be a super
stuff is starting to add up. Yeah,
it is. It looks like it's going to be a super competitive election, and I mean that at the national popular vote. I really think that maybe if there wasn't if we are expecting a polling error on the national level, this is the absolute perfect environment for that. So, in any case, you mentioned some swings, and I'll go back to that because we're going to jump into Virginia. You mentioned some 16-point swings and 12-point swings. All right, so when you go back to the Virginia race, the off-year election, Virginia governor's race.
Yeah.
You go and you look at the New Jersey governor's race, and then you had this special election months after in Texas 34. So we were tracking the same number. This is what we used to kind of influence our midterm projections, but we went heavy on fundamentals, and we were off in the midterms. There's no other way around it. But there were 12-point swings in Loudoun County. There was a 12-point swing in New Jersey. There was a huge swing in Texas 34. So these numbers that you're showing that you mentioned came to mind when we were tracking these numbers leading up to the midterms, right? So is there, as you're tracking this, and you're tracking this in Virginia, have you tried to do a regression, or have you tried to speculate or project what this return rate would look like on election day?
Yeah, so I haven't been the one doing it. I've been speaking with multiple people who have been doing that. The problem with Virginia is mainly just you don't have the party registration. There is modeled party registration, but the person doing that, I spoke with someone else who's really good with that stuff, and they thought it was even better for Republicans than what the model was. So I'm kind of taking that with a grain of salt. But the general idea is that Virginia is going to be Harris plus 3 to 5. And I say plus 3 because that was a specific number mentioned to me by someone who really is all in on Virginia. Calculated Youngkin's win in 21 based on the stuff we're seeing right now, going based on the model party. And they had Youngkin winning. I think they projected it in late October based on the early vote. And it's tricky. It's not something that I think that I'm able to do on the nose, but I'm hearing 3 to 5, maybe 6 for Kamala Harris. I think 6 would be the high end of if current trends continue. So 3 to 6, and that's not good for Democrats at all. That's not where they want to be.
No, it's not, because maybe there's a delta with North Carolina, Virginia, and Pennsylvania. I'm quite certain there is. There's obviously there's a delta with Iowa and how it influences Wisconsin, and how Wisconsin influences Pennsylvania, and there used to be a more pronounced correlation with Florida and Pennsylvania before the bellwether status.
That does not exist anymore.
Yeah, so there was a good correlation you could run with Florida, margins, turnout, how the rest of the nation would vote. No, it's not good, and if I just don't believe anything is in a vacuum, especially when you start talking about regions.
Yep.
Right. That's why you can have these Rust Belt states behave differently than these Sun Belt states. Well, they're culturally different, and they're demographically different, and their economies are different, and the history of voting is different in these states. So it's hard to just nail them all into one, because things are doing a lot of different things at the same time. So, but if you would think if Virginia was competitive, somewhat competitive, let's just say not plus 10 like it was in 2020, and let's just call it
plus 5.
Yes, that's what I'm going to say. Say it's plus 5. You would have to assume that there's impact in Pennsylvania. So what are you? Yeah. So do you have any data? Do you have any feedback? Do you have any speculation from those who are tracking us what Pennsylvania may look like?
Yeah. So, and there is a quick mail-in tidbit. So Pennsylvania mail is about 5 to 6 points redder than it was at this point in 2020. So just keep that in mind when we talk about Pennsylvania. It isn't as insane as North Carolina, but 5 points is something. And Pennsylvania is a really Democratic-heavy mail-in state in 2022. And I was talking about this, I think earlier this week. If you go from 2020 to 2022, Senate race, North Carolina, that got more Republican than the presidential race in 2020. So did the mail. Pennsylvania, the mail got bluer from 2020 to 2022. So did the Senate race. Florida, the mail got redder from 20 to 2022, and we all know what happened in Florida. So looking at that slew of 3 states that I'm really looking at on top of Virginia, the thing about Virginia is you pair all of that. And so I'm trying to preface this because we need to just contextualize. There are so many things adding up here. And I'm getting to the point where this probably isn't just, oh, it's just North Carolina. It's just 15 points there. Oh, it's just 5 points in Pennsylvania, right? It's just another 7 points in Florida. Florida is its own monster, but come on, right? It's happening there.
Yep.
Virginia. There are a couple interesting things coming out of Virginia, and we can get into the specifics. What came out today is that the amount of now this is modeled. It could be better, and I think it's better for Republicans because this modeled apparently underestimates Republicans a little bit. There are triple the amount of low propensity voters who are voting Republican right now than Democrat. I think it's around 300 to 1,500, right? No, I had that wrong. 400 to close to 1,500. So you're over 3 times Democrat to Republican have voted in 0 of the last 4 elections. And the total is like, it's 1,500 votes, right? The problem is this is a trend, and the trend is accelerating, right? And this is Virginia, and you mentioned these states, they have relations to each other. Virginia, you're talking about North Carolina, Georgia, Pennsylvania, right? A lot of this higher GOP county turnout, and by the way, there's some relaxed turnout in the Fairfax area, and I think Loudoun, I think Prince William, some of these places in Northern Virginia, they're kind of falling off. Virginia had a sugar high on day one, and the blue counties are falling back to more normal levels. The GOP counties, some of them are picking up pace. And when I say GOP counties, these are counties that have voted 60, 70, 80% Republican in congressional races and president, right? So it doesn't mean 100% of them are going to Trump. And the blue areas, and this goes both ways, and maybe Trump is doing better with independents, right? Maybe instead of losing, 60% of independents in Fairfax, he's losing 55%. I'm just making that number up, right? Maybe it's instead of 70%, it's 60%, right? Instead of losing them by a ton, he's losing them by a lot, right? So what's going on in Virginia is you have really high turnout in white working class rural counties on more of the outskirts of Virginia, away from that Northern Virginia region. Yep. And as you said, this stuff doesn't we have state borders, but that doesn't mean that as soon as you cross this line, the people in that county next to them who are also white working class and rural, this is why you have the whole Iowa-Wisconsin thing.
Yep, that's exactly right.
These trends aren't just going to stop. Yeah.
Well, right, and then the common knowledge or this unspoken rule is, Michigan can't vote for Harris if Wisconsin and Michigan or Wisconsin and Pennsylvania vote for Trump. You can't do that. Well, we don't know that. We don't know that for sure because demographics change every 4 years, right? There's going to be a little bit less of the white voter. That's just the way it goes, right? So any little changes to that, your margins are no longer the same is what I'm getting at 4 years later. You've got to expand your camp here and get your turnout a little bit, whatever it is that those strategists, I don't get paid to strategize, but there's ways you have to do this to account for that. So if you have a state that's 82 or 84% white in terms of their voting electorate and 10 or 12% African Americans, 5% Hispanic, that's why they vote similar together. They're culturally somewhat the same, share a lot of the same denominations in religion.
Right.
So it does stand to reason that there would be impact across those 3 states. Michigan,
and the reason I really mentioned North Carolina, now there is also Georgia, but the sad part about Georgia is we have no party data. All we know is that the electorate's a little bit more white. There's less volume down there. It's really nothing I don't think you can extrapolate to just on its face. You'd have to look at other states. But you look at North Carolina and you look at Virginia.
Yep.
And before Virginia started voting, I was like, wow, North Carolina is looking really red. Now that Virginia started voting, I'm like, wow, Republicans in Virginia are really fired up, right? And then you look at Pennsylvania. The mail is redder than 2020 by 5 points. And the big takeaway, I think, before, I don't think Virginia's flipping. I don't know how you feel about that. I think that 3 is probably as good as Trump could ask for, mainly because of the ramifications it would mean for him in the
Yeah.
electoral college. The white working class vote, the white rural vote, and a lack of minority turnout, at least for now. And the mail's coming in; it's not outdoing these totals I'm giving you include mail. A lot of mail is still outstanding, but the pace of the mail coming in the blue areas isn't where they thought they would be. Is the thing, right? And every day that goes by is another day that Republicans, or I should say, Republican counties, are increasing their rate of turnout over the blue counties, and that begs the question:
so that was going to be
where is the energy?
Yep.
And is it with the blue areas or the red areas? If it's staying in these red areas and Northern Virginia is just checked out, right? Checked out relative to 2020 and maybe 2016. It's not a position you want to be in. And I hazard to guess the other white rural working class parts of Pennsylvania, North Carolina, maybe in like the Raleigh area, turnout might be diminished just like it is in the Northern Virginia area, maybe Atlanta, Philadelphia. There are a lot of things where you have to think about if the minority turnout, if the Dem turnout is lower in Virginia and North Carolina, it's not just going to be those 2 states. That's where I'm at. Am I saying call the race for Trump right now? No, I'm just saying it's not a spot Kamala Harris should want to be in.
And that's exactly you just did a better job explaining it. That was my exact point with Michigan, trying to say the unspoken rule. These 3 states supposedly voting together, and there is not a rule to this. Trends break every election cycle. There's always new trends. It's just Michigan votes further to the left because there's a larger urban area and larger counties that support those demographics and obviously voter turnout. So if you're getting this larger turnout among these red counties and in some parts, the entire regions, Wisconsin for one, your Southwest and North, if they're turning out and they're turning out at levels that's not in people's models.
Also low propensity. You got to keep that in mind too.
That's what, I've listened to Barris talk about that off and on for a while now. He's constantly tracking this stuff. I don't remember the percentage he said about these low propensity voters that are coming out and vote. It's sounding like a lot like 2016. I don't know, but it's certainly starting to sound like 2016 in terms of that. And I'm just, if I'm being totally subjective here, is Harris is very vulnerable as far as Democrats go.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah,
she's just vulnerable, man. She's not
a fragile coalition.
Yeah, I think. She just isn't media savvy. Sorry, I'm getting distracted here. She's just not media savvy for one. And I think, over the course of this campaign, getting in front of the cameras, what they tried to hide her from for a while, you can only hide for so long. Then the media starts resenting you, even if they're, if they are, let's say, allies to a certain extent, which I don't think it'd be very surprising to say that. When you shun them and you're not doing your part, they will turn on you. They will turn on you. They might not break the daggers out, but they will turn on you. They're going to stop giving you free coverage. They're going to stop giving you good coverage. And that's one of the Trump being impervious. There's no such thing as bad coverage for Trump. It's just coverage. There's just coverage for Trump. So there was a difference there is what I'm saying. Being a known commodity, I just don't see Harris. Let me reverse that statement, because how about this? It doesn't surprise me that we are seeing turnout in these areas, considering Trump being the candidate on the Republican side. As I said,
got shot at twice. You could say once, almost twice.
Right. This is his third. This is his third presidential campaign. He's had more votes than anybody in history because he's ran. And then you have to counter that with Kamala Harris, who's a VP, who didn't have a primary, who Biden was the president and a very unpopular president at that. We're talking favorabilities and approval ratings.
Yep.
because sometimes favorabilities can be a little higher in your approval rating. Not in his case. There's just a lot of baggage is what I'm getting at. And I just don't know if she can move the needle. And that's it. If this is a Republican year, she's not going to be able to move the needle to offset these types of imbalances and losses. And I think you're seeing that bear out in some of these national polls that we've had the last few days, to where it's like, hey, guys, we got some head scratchers here. This isn't a +4, +5 race or a +3 race. We've got 2 out of the last 3 polls saying this is a +1 or even race. So, and I go to my models, and that's why I run different models that capture different parts of the election. Yeah, they're designed for different things, and I bring them together. And man, I've had it less than the RCP average, and certainly less than 538. Right now, I think it's like my models are projecting 1.3. And when I posted that September 15th, I think RCP had it at 2.2. My model said 1.3. So, I don't know where this is going to go, but it's getting really exciting again, especially when you're dealing with that type of data, and that data has implications for election day. So on that note, there again, this other unwritten rule here, and it's logical. It's kind of binary. It's linear, I guess, linearly logical, but if the Republicans are voting so much in mail, right, and they're doing all this early voting, and it comes time for election day turnout, and you've already voted, is this unwritten rule, which I don't know who made it up and if it's even necessarily all that true, do the Republicans run a risk of cannibalizing their election day voting turnout?
So I think you got to look at both sides, right? The volume of mail is down on both sides, and that's just a fact, right? So it's hard to look at I'm trying to compare the ratios. And so the fact is that Republicans have declined less than Democrats from the pandemic here. And in some cases, they're eclipsing 2022. Now, this is why I brought up Virginia, with there being around, now this is just modeled, let's just say it's double, we could say it's quadruple, whatever it is, triple the amount of GOP voters are low propensity than Democrats. And so there's 2 sides of this argument in favor of Republicans. One is, if that's the case, what that means is you have, as Trump right now, you have a larger bucket of voters if you're drawing on the low propensity. And that's why turnout, right? That's why turnout is going to benefit Trump, at least according to a lot of these polls, and now bearing out in the data, where Republicans, even though they're doing better in mail, they don't really have to worry about cannibalizing their election day vote. And I think that's kind of for 2 reasons. One, as I just mentioned, with there being, according to I believe September 25th or 6th, triple the amount of low propensity voters in person. So in person to Democrats. What that means is the people who are voting in person, you have a lot of regular voters coming out. And if you're turning out your base and you're turning out low propensity voters, it just means that you have more people to draw from, right? There's more Republicans to draw from. Speaking of that points to the fact that this is a better environment for Republicans. They just have more voters. And that's a lot of this data is crossing over itself. You say that we might be trending 3 points from 2020, right? And if there's more Republicans that Trump can draw from, that would make sense.
Yep.
The second thing, this is entirely not really, I guess, data-based. This is just kind of my opinion. Democrats vote early and they vote by mail. It happened in 2020. It happened in 2022. There's a belief that there's going to be a blue tsunami on election day and that it's going to offset the red tsunami that has always been election day from in 2022, 2020, and the off-year elections. I just don't see that happening. And the reason for this, at least on my end, is just simple logical deduction, right? Okay, less votes than the pandemic year. Okay, less overall mail-in votes than the pandemic year. But the Democrats who want to vote, if they voted by mail in 2022 and 24, or 2020 and 2022, Why would you pick the more difficult option and show up in person? Number two, if you're a Republican, right, and you're declining at a similar rate as Democrats, what that means is you still have your day, right? Democrats are declining more. And we know that based on the data points we mentioned in this podcast, with the national environment and just simple logical reasoning, why would there be a blue tsunami on election day? Because mail, and this is the bottom line, mail is a very easy way to vote, a low effort way to vote. Doesn't mean it's a bad way to vote. I mean, a lot of people think it's not secure. I think it depends on the state you're in. Regardless of people's opinions on how secure, who shouldn't vote by mail, it's easy, it's convenient, it's low effort. And so my thing is, I think all the Republicans who wanted to vote in person, there might be less than 2020, but I don't think that the Democrats are going to be able to overcome that. And a lot of these polls have shown that Trump is still winning the election day vote by double digits. Kamala Harris is still winning the mail by double digits.
Yep.
Right. And that's how it was in 2020. And so that's why I posed the question. If the splits are being somewhat even, but the volume of mail is down and the in-person voting stays as Republican as it's been,
yep.
I'm not going to call the election for anybody, but it's just not good for Democrats.
No, it's not.
It's not good.
You got to say who historically owns election day turnout, and it's not debatable. It's a Republican. Yeah. That's what it's when they turn out and they vote. Now things change again. The pandemic changed everything. It changed the way we work. It changed the way we travel. It may even change the way we vote now. But going on your point, though, if the volume is down but the margins have closed, then these people still have to vote. And if we're already tracking low propensity voters, and those low propensity voters are showing a propensity to vote for Trump, then you have to assume that election day turnout is going to be very favorable for Trump. And then again, just to work that back in there, that Gallup poll. In fact, did you see that post? It blew up. I did, based off the regression. So I got that from you, by the way. I got your idea, and then I said, I'm going to run this through a model. I'm going to create a regression model, and we're going to go back and we're going to look at 2008. And I went all the way back to 1992. It's a little noisy, but it makes sense why it's a little noisy. 1992 is a long time ago. I don't know if you were born in 1992.
No.
Oh, wow.
Nope.
Oh, well. But it was a different electorate. Certainly, it's different elections. You had Ross Perot. And there were some gentlemen that came into my comment threads, and they were some poli-sci professors. And they were saying, you clipped your model to fit your data. I said, no, I'm not going to argue about this. 1992 is irrelevant. It's irrelevant to who we are today. The election, the environment has changed. The political landscape has changed. We're dealing with somewhat many realignments. We're no longer a glacier or a glacier type of environment when it comes to the African American vote and Hispanic vote. So you better update your priors, as people like to say. So that regression model, though, it shows the strong correlation between partisan affiliation or your propensity. And I think what Gallup had at +5 or +3. No, +3. And that's where you that's where you get your 2.5 point national popular vote. Then you can start suffering from myopia, and then you got the Atlas Intel showing Trump up 2 or 3, and you got Rasmussen showing Trump up 2. So I don't really want to go that route with it. But if you start bringing in historical error rates of 2.4%, if Trump's polling at 47 or 47.3, 47.4, you add a 2.4%. Now you got a complete toss-up in the national popular vote. And I don't even want to think what would happen electorally speaking. That's where you get these states like Virginia. They start getting close. Minnesota probably flips. And Maine's probably there.
Maine's up in the air, yeah. New Hampshire's up in the air.
Well, I'm with you, and I've done this about 10 different ways. To be honest with you, I don't think in any of my models Virginia flips.
I'm not expecting it to flip. Yeah,
I'm almost positive I've never flipped it. Okay, the two states that do flip though are Minnesota goes first. it seems to always flip. And I want to say New Hampshire, depending on the variables and how much I push it, and maybe Maine, but I don't know if Maine flips all that often as well. We're talking like 30-some%. But if you wanted to create a new tipping point state, and meaning tipping point beyond electoral college, let's just say, what would be your tipping point electoral college landslide?
Okay.
It would, so you can do it in layers. So you could go back to 2008 when Obama flipped Indiana,
right?
And he flipped North Carolina. So you could say maybe Minnesota would be kind of like a North Carolina, and then Indiana would be, the version of that maybe would be New Mexico. I don't know. There's some, you can play some games with the margins, play some games with how they line up on the blue and the red, and how they're mirror image of one another, I guess you could say. So yeah, that's very interesting though, man. I've been wanting to have this conversation, and to be quite honest with you, I don't follow it that deeply. John Couvillon's really good at this, and John Couvillon's from Louisiana as well. And it's just something I like it. Don't get me wrong, but the bandwidth that I have to focus on those types of nuances, I usually just kind of collect that information and save what I want. Obviously, if it's useful. So I do, man. I think this is some great information that we're kicking back and forth here, because I don't want to get into vibes, but there's just a lot of things that look awfully different this election year. And you said that a couple times. Whose position would you rather be in? I'd rather be in Trump's position every day, all day. So,
speaking of that, I've seen. So this is starting out in September, when the conversation was mainly about kind of polls and stuff. That was before we had a lot of data. A lot of these guys talking about they've mainly just been talking about polls. And there's this guy in Pennsylvania, and I'm not going to name anybody. And then there's this guy who runs this modeling early vote kind of company, and they've been talking about how they think that Harris is in a strong position. The guy in Pennsylvania thinks Harris up 2 in Pennsylvania. I think it's mainly just poll informed. And over the past 2 weeks, I haven't seen them shout that the sky is falling. And these are like liberal, I don't want to say commentators, but data analysts over on social media. I'm seeing them come out, and they're kind of moving the goalposts a little bit. So they're kind of starting to say, oh, by the way, don't read too much into the early vote. I know that the mail-ins are down, but I think that the trends are going to switch, and Republicans aren't going to come out on election day as much as they used to, is what they're saying now. And over in Pennsylvania, the idea that this guy was saying was, I still have Kamala Harris up too, but people are saying that the mail is redder than 2020, but the problem is I don't think that he has enough on election day to overcome it, right? And so the conversation is shifting to, they weren't even worried about this data, to we're now going to figure out how we can spin this data and make the assumption. And this is what I was telling you. You have to make an assumption that you shouldn't want to have to make, and that they didn't have to make in Pennsylvania in 2022. I mean, gosh, the Democratic mail-in vote was like 70%, right? In 22 in Pennsylvania. And in 2020, obviously, we know what happened then. There was a massive firewall. And I mentioned this. I've been kind of scouring the 2016 and 2020 election night coverages on cable networks. And on 2020, the conversation in every state was basically, we have a lot of early vote, mail-in vote. There's a blue firewall of ballots. Do we think Trump can overcome it? You don't want to be the party. You don't want to be the candidate that is saying, we'll vote later, right? We're not good right now, but trust me, we'll catch up, right?
We're gonna,
doesn't mean you lost, but you don't want to be saying that.
Trust me, bro. Yeah. We're gonna make it up on election day. No, you're 100% right, man.
That's kind of where I think we're at.
Well, yeah, and then if you, like you said, you don't want to be trying to make up on election day when typically your voters don't show up on election day, right? Or at least not
right.
Margin.
So Republicans are already going to show up on election day, right? That's not even in the question. This is the Democrats' time, right? I don't know how to phrase it. This is supposed to be their thing. This is supposed to be their lap ahead. This is supposed to be them getting a head start. Yep. And are they ahead? Yeah, I mean, Democrats are outnumbering. But if you put it in context, they're behind. That's the problem. And
Yep.
we know that without a doubt, Republicans are going to show up. And I'm just sitting back and I'm looking at all the states or all the states we have good data for: Virginia, Pennsylvania, North Carolina. There's some things you could draw from Georgia, but I'm going to leave that out of it. Florida. You just look at all of it, and a couple conclusions come to mind. GOP is energized. GOP wants to get their vote in for Trump, and that's something we haven't mentioned. What is it? Even if you are cannibalizing some of your election day vote, these people in Virginia, it's the first week of voting, and all these rural counties are sky high. Even if they're slightly outnumbered, not slightly, broadly outnumbered by Fairfax and Northern Virginia, they're rushing to get their vote in at a much higher rate. And what that tells me isn't red Virginia. What that tells me is it's not just going to be in Virginia.
No, that's 100%.
Yeah.
No. So if it's this
The
larger
energy.
Yep. If it's this larger bank of voters, that's what larger banks. That's how this larger electorate in terms of partisan. That's how they behave. They vote early. They're going to vote often, and they're going to vote on election day. I mean, that's just how it goes. It's how it happened in 2020. And you saw 2016 was kind of a lackluster turnout. Trump, I mean, back then that was wild. Trump was so new. They were used to it. You didn't know what to expect. Like, man, this could be some Lyndon Johnson type margins here, over Goldwater, or Bashar Assad type election outcome. Or what he did, he throws a curveball and he wins the electoral college, which anyway, it's crazy. It's not a crazy night. Well, good. Let's pivot to some polling. Yeah. And no, this is all great. This is great context because it lines up with some things that we've seen in some recent polling. I don't like the herding that's going on right now among
Pennsylvania is a total mess.
Man, these guys are not trying. It doesn't look like they're trying to poll, and they're just don't want to get away from the pack a little bit. Or it's really that tight of a race. But here's some feedback on that. I looked at a bunch of different crosstabs, and they all, you got a bunch of 48 races, 50-50, 49-48, 48-47, and it goes back and forth. There's a few. You add all that up and aggregate, you got a few decimal points separating them. We'll just pick Pennsylvania. But as of right now, the last 2 days, there's been a lot of battleground polls come out, and it's showing a straight up tied race. However, if you look at the crosstabs, none of those two crosstabs are the same. There's always something drastically different about their crosstabs compared to the other, yet they're all getting these 49 and 48 or 48 and 48 races. And I don't understand what's going on with that. I don't know if it's hurting. I haven't polled Pennsylvania since late July. I think it was July 29th, July 30th, and I polled it. It was like Trump 47.6 or 47.8 to Kamala 46.4. So he was up like 1.4, 1.2 points. But I had him up over a point. It was pretty clear to me that he was up a point, and according to the according to the data, and then how the demographics shook out. So I don't know what's going on. Maybe the battleground states is really that tight. At least polling wise. The speculation of our whole premise for this first half hour, if what we're saying is correct, then the polls won't be right. But I'll tell you what I found in Nevada, and I'll try to sprinkle it in here with some maybe a North Carolina poll as well. First of all, I didn't know Rasmussen was polling Nevada today. Did they release a poll, or are they just polling Nevada? Did somebody say
I think they had Trump up 1 in Nevada.
So they did release their poll? Did you remember the top line?
Oh, no, but I think it was Trump +1. I don't remember what percent he was at.
Okay.
But, yeah.
So that's what I found was a Trump +1, or actually 1.1. Whatever. Yeah. 48.8 to 47.7. Here, but I want to use this as an example to compared to other polls and how their crosstabs look. If you go to look New York Times Siena, they did some Sunbelt polling. I think they averaged them together. They had like Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, North Carolina, and they had their crosstabs sort of collectively, right?
Yep.
And then you look at CNN, at their crosstabs, they have Trump winning among men like 58-37.
Yeah,
okay,
something insane.
And that's terrible. I mean, I can't fathom I can't fathom the electorate behaving that way. I'm not saying it can't, but I can't fathom that. And then they're showing Trump running even with Hispanics and his but Kamala is running 21 points over Trump among women. So that flattens everything out, makes it even again. I'm going to tell you now, I didn't see that in Nevada. I didn't see anything remotely like that in Nevada. I think Insider Advantage has the white voting bloc tied at 48-48 in one of their last polls. I didn't see that either. But I also didn't see these crazy margins. So when I break it down demographically, and I look at white men and white women, the white men are voting for Trump like 63 or 4%, maybe a touch higher, 64-33, something like that, which is just a marginal improvement from 2020. I think it was 59-40 or 60. Yeah, 59-40 or 60-39 over Biden.
Yeah.
So we're only moving the needle a little bit. And the same with women. I think women voted for Trump in 2020 over Biden by like 8 points. I think I had the white women beating or voting for Trump by 2 points. They over Harris. It's not there's just, it looks like she's taking some of the support, but she's not but they're not dominating. The white women aren't dominating overwhelmingly for Trump.
Yep.
So that comes out to about 55% of the white vote supporting Trump and 42% supporting Harris. Now, that's a big improvement over 2020. But it's just not these other crazy margins. All right. Now, if we take men by themselves, I think the margins were, I think it was plus 11, maybe 10 for Trump over Harris. But here's the kicker. She was only beating him among women by like 7 points. That completely blew my mind. I was not expecting that. Now the black vote, it was overwhelmingly like it was threefold over 2020's margins. But this was before I weighted it. I had to weight it because there was some too many men in there, and it kind of threw the raw data off. But it went from they were voting for Trump like 30-something% in the raw data. Once I weighted it, it comes out to about 21%. Now that's only a few percent shift to the right over 2020. I think they voted for Trump like 18 or 19% in 2020. Now they're voting for him like 21%. So we keep going down the line. And in 2020, among Hispanics, I think the margin, Trump got 37% in Nevada. He's now at 42%. Okay, 43%, something like that. He's not losing by much. You put all of that together, and you set up a good electorate model, and you have 64% white vote, 19% Hispanic, 7 or 8% black, and 9 or 10% Asian other. That creates your electorate, and you make sure your demographics are your education and all that is correct. And you run those demographics through there, you're going to get a +1 Trump victory. You can't help but not. So I don't get where we're constantly getting these tied races or these other nonsensical polls, and their crosstabs are the complete opposite of one another, yet they're getting the same results. I'm just not able to figure that part out. Now, speaking of problems in polls, if I just take the partisan affiliation or the party affiliation, and I wait on that by itself, which I usually do because that gives me a good idea what kind of sample I'm dealing with. So I take the raw data, break it down by party affiliation, and then weight the sample off of a weighted party affiliation sample, where we think it's going to fall. In this case, 34, 34, 32. So 34 Republican, 34 Democrat, 32 Independent. That will greatly fix a lot of the skew in your sample. Just based on that alone, Trump wins Nevada because he's winning.
Yeah.
He's winning independents. He's winning. You got a split ratio between Democrat and Republican, but he's winning independents. Just that alone puts Trump up over 1 point. So does that mean he's going to win by 1 point? I don't know, but he was winning independents in the raw data before I sampled, before I weighted it. He was winning the independents by more than 10 points, or roughly around 10 points. After I sampled it, or after I weighted it, excuse me, I'll get it out in a minute. After I weighted it, he was up 3 points, or 7 points. Excuse me, he was up 7 points. The other demographic popped in my mind, 3 points, and I'm going to explain that. Ages 30 to 44. He was up 3 points, weighted data in my poll. He was up 50 to 47. Oh. Now that's a little strange. I know it is, because other crosstabs aren't showing that, and typically the exit polling didn't show that. But he was winning that age demographic by 3 points after waiting for it. So I don't know if that was just happened to be a bad sample. Things like that happen because we just mentioned focal data had Trump losing to the Hispanic vote to Kamala Harris 82 to 18. I mean, some nonsense like that. But, I didn't get those kind of margins. But there were some things in my poll as well that I didn't quite like. Maybe that's not true. The 30 to 44 going 3 points for Trump. I don't know. That's just what the data showed. That's what it came out to be after I weighted it. But here's another issue. Trump was only getting 91% of the Republican support in that survey. That was collection, and that was even weighting, and he was only getting 91% of the Republican vote. I don't think that's true either. I think he's going to get 95% of the vote, just like he did every other year. But for whatever reason, that's the way my sample shook out. That's what the results were when I weighted it. That's what I reported. Do I think that's true? I don't think it's true at all. I think he's going to get 95% of the Republican vote. And now, do you see where we're going? Let's say that everything I just said holds up. You could throw out the 30 to 44. Let's consider that everything I said is prophecy, and it's going to take place on Election Day. That margin will be significantly higher for Trump. Harris will be in the 46s and the low 46s at that. Trump will be closer to 51%. It'll be a 4.5 point race in Nevada, which goes back to the things you've been kind of hinting at about this swing of sorts. That type of margin wouldn't surprise me in a place like Nevada if the state is if the country is shifting right from 2020. I don't mean shifting right indefinitely. I just mean shifting right from 2020. You would expect margins of that. So Biden won the state by what, like 2.3 or 2.4?
Yeah, something like that.
If Trump was to win it by 3 or 4 points, now we're talking a 6.7 point swing, net swing all the way around. So again, that's speculation, but I'm just sharing the poll. Now, interesting about what Washoe County is, I think Barris mentioned last night, or somebody tagged me, that Barris was showing that Washoe County was up that Trump was up over Harris in Washoe County by a handful of points, and he was only down like 3 in Clark County. I didn't get those margins. At best, Washoe is less than 1 point for Harris or less than 1 point for Trump. I don't know. It's very marginal. And Clark is still Kamala by like four points and some change. And that's taking zip codes. That's taking zip codes and doing my analysis and dropping it over my counties. But he's winning the rest of the state, what I call the rest of the state, outside of Washoe and Clark. He's winning those by huge margins, which he expected to do.
Right.
But in Lincoln County, he's pulling in over 70% of the vote in Lincoln County. So he's increasing his margins in those states, which I didn't think was even possible. And now you got WashU and these other places. My poll is telling me that the state has shifted right. And it's everything we've been having this conversation up to this point validates that. I can see it clear as day. These counties over 2020, even over 2016, there has been a movement to the right, and there seems to be more Republicans all of a sudden in that state. Another thing is that state may not be 34-34 on election day. That state could be 35-33. It could be 35-34.
Could be the same elsewhere too.
That's exactly right.
You know?
If that's the case, then all of our polls are going to be wrong, and especially if you throw in the independents. So what really surprised me was Trump was winning the independents by 7 points in that state. Somebody messaged me this evening after I dropped the poll, and they're like, "Hey man, great job. Tip has Trump winning the independents only by 1 point." And I'm like, okay. I mean, I can't do anything about that. Good for Tip. CNN has Trump winning the white vote in Nevada by, or the male vote in Nevada by 18 points. So
yeah,
go take there's all kinds of stuff here. It's a buffet of options. You know, you can pick your poison. You know,
I think we're in for a miss. That's kind of where I'm at. And you kind of mentioned the crosstabs. A lot of these national polls coming out, there's two levels for it. You know, with the national polls, a lot of these crosstab data, because, okay, what's the point of polling and then releasing all these crosstabs if you're going to have Kamala Harris winning 82% of the Hispanic vote, right?
Yeah.
It's stuff like that. Like, why even?
Yep. Or 99% of the Democrat vote. 99%.
Exactly. Why not just say 100, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that gets you a +2 Harris poll with 99% of the Democrats voting for her. Okay.
But you can take a lot of this demographic data in these polls with Harris up like 2 to 5 in the popular vote, and you plug it into they're not like highly scientific, but the swingometers, there's a 538 one, and there's the Cook Political Report one. You could do it in both. A lot of these national polls coming out, Trump just wins the Electoral College in all of them. Yeah. And it's like, you've got to get to a point where we're saying that the country has shifted right. We're saying that there's an Electoral College bias. You take the demographic data, like the data you mentioned, and a lot of these polls, there was a poll out today with Kamala Harris up, I think, 2 or 3 in Pennsylvania, and Trump is winning independents by 4. And I'm like, he's winning Pennsylvania if he's winning independents by 4 at that point. It's just like, you're probably not losing Pennsylvania. A guy that I know who does the early voting data and turnout data for a living thinks that Democrats are only going to outvote Republicans in Pennsylvania by party registration, not party lean. 2020, I think, was R+1 or tie in Pennsylvania.
Yep.
But there were more registered Democrats who voted. But he has it almost even with registrations. And that's before you have the Democrats who might be ancestral Democrats, or the independents who might identify as Republican. And he has them almost, I don't want to say 50-50, but even in Pennsylvania. And I think that a lot of to what you said, where Trump is doing well with the white vote, he's improving in some polls among Hispanics. And either the polls are just so wrong. Here's the thing. A lot of the top lines just can't be right with their crosstabs, or their party vote share for each candidate. Like, if she's getting 99% of the Democratic vote, but Trump is getting 90% of the Republican vote, well, you can just say that that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And then what do we do with your poll? You know,
that's
like, and this is going to be the conversation in November. What do we do with all these pollsters for the past 6 months who are dropping these polls where, oh my God, Trump is winning independents by 10, but she's getting 99% Democratic vote share, and Trump is getting 89. There was an echelon survey out today.
Yep.
Kamala's getting 16% of the conservative vote nationwide. My gosh, not even Republican conservative vote, right? There's still moderate Republicans in there. Like, what do you do with these polls? And I think Nevada, if I'm not mistaken, it's harder to poll Republicans in Nevada, at least in the past few presidential elections, even in the midterms. I think that polls have overstated Trump support. I'm not saying yours has, but that's just kind of been the average has been happening that. But the state shifted right since those misses, right? Since
Yep.
20. And that could change. But I think that we're in for a lot of misses. And I think that Trump is just improving, kind of like how you outlined in Nevada. Nevada's one state I've been skeptical on. I have that as his second hardest state. I'm trying not to let my opinions be swayed by the polls of the day. Mine has always been Michigan, the hardest, then Nevada. And the reason for that, he just hasn't won Nevada before, right?
That's
it's
right.
just been going Democratic. It's kind of like North Carolina. It's not the same, but we always say we're going to win it. You never win it. I think that this could be the year that Trump wins it, and your poll it checks out with a narrow 1 point win in Nevada. Even if he's doing 2-3 points in Arizona, I still think Nevada's close. Yeah, and I think that Trump is in a good spot compared to 2020 there.
Well, look, in my models, when you share them every time I update them, and I appreciate that. I have it 291. Both my models, my composite model. When I take all that information and run it through my battleground model and add my relative bias, he loses Michigan and Nevada collectively by around 0.6 points. And I'll tell you exactly who it is. He barely loses Nevada by like 0.2, which is ridiculous to even post. And because you're like, really, Jason, you're going to post she's going to win by 0.2. Really? 0.2? Why not 0.3? Why not 0.1? But anyway, so it's 0.2, and then Nevada's like 0.4 to 0.6, something like that. So it's collective is like within 6 points. And that's just the way it falls. Okay. And could I move the needle? Yeah, I could. But they're Democrat states. The Democrats have won them, just like you mentioned. So therefore, I give it to the Democrats. It's a toss up, but it leans. It's like toss up Democrat favorite. So that's why this poll in Nevada surprised me a lot. I guess I'm considering to do how I want to interpret my poll as it relates to my models, because even on my own polls in other states, even the national electorate, it doesn't always line up with my models. So, it's funny when you poll and you've been doing it and you've been following these other pollsters, and once you do a few of them, you kind of understand it's like, this stuff is kind of subjective. This is not quite as easy as getting the data and trying to. It's really though doing the homework and creating those good electorate models, taking the time to do regression analysis, finding out the voting patterns, using really good sources, and trying to create a good electorate so you can help interpret that data from your polling and see what's possible and what's not possible, especially getting down into regions and weighting and all of that. So creating the electorate, I think that's going to be the source of the polling miss. Yep.
Sounds just like 2016, even some states in 2020. I think that the national environment, we've had some good national polls, and this is what I said the other day. I think our national polls right now are better than our state polls because we're seeing these crazy margins going on the state level. And look, you have smaller sample sizes. It can be harder to poll states. It's just how it is sometimes.
Yep.
You have Wisconsin over there with 5, 6, 7, 8 point misses, sometimes more. National, even in 2016, you go look at the RCP average. It was within a point. Even 2020, which was a bad year for polling, I think it was within 2.5 or 3 points in the average nationally. And that's why I'm kind of, at the moment, I'm still paying attention to state polls, but I'm kind of seeing them come out. Even when Trump is leading, I'm kind of just paying attention, in my opinion, to the national environment and then putting that in context with the state polls. And then, of course, looking at the pollster and seeing, okay, how have they done in Pennsylvania? Is this a pollster that only polls Massachusetts and is now polling Pennsylvania?
Yeah.
And now has Kamala Harris up 4 or 5 points? Okay, maybe that's a little suspicious, right? So I'm kind of I'm trying to take each one and I'm trying to put it in context. And then going back to what we talked about for the first half, I'm putting it in context as to where the environment may be in these states being polled and what's actually happening. And where it looks like, that this election may be going in favor of higher GOP turnout. and then maybe these polls, it seems like they're underrepresenting Republicans, or maybe underrepresenting, white working class, or I should say non-college educated voters. I try not to dig too deep into the polls with education or race anymore, because I just think that it's probably a waste of time at this point, because I think there's going to be a miss. But I think we're in for a miss. I don't know how big the miss is going to be. I don't know if the big miss is going to be, Pennsylvania this time. Maybe Trump is ahead by 4 this whole time because of the assassination. There's so many factors, but I just think the environment is going to favor him.
If you throw in a polling miss, a typical polling miss, he is up 3 points.
Even
or more.
a below average polling miss.
So you brought up some couple of points here about the environment. The consensus is I have a voter sentiment, modus, and a consensus has Trump up 0.9 points. Okay, has him up 0.9. And the reason, it's economic sentiment, but it's the type of economics that are impactful not only to households, but they are predictive variables in presidential election years. And it could be real disposable income, CCI, CPI, things that affect people, consumer spending, saving. S&P 500, how much has it grown, which is doing pretty well. Inflation's down. So I don't mess with the macro. That's what Concordia is for. And you tie that to polling. So I always have to, it's just not as heavily weighted. I weight the economic factors heavier, and then I use polling and maybe some favorability to give a nice economic sentiment. And I've back tested this to all the other elections as well to see how predictive it was. And I've fine tuned it, calibrated it, etc. In any case, it has Trump beating her by 0.9. Now, it's my only model that showing that being the case. But when I add them all together, it increases Trump's score to about 48.2. If Trump was to win this election by 1 point, that would be your 3-point polling miss right there. So, it very well could be possible. I don't know. I know my electorate model, which is, again, built off regression models, crosstabs, polling. It's strictly a demographic aggregator, and then I run simulations, and it shows it 2 points. It shows it Harris 50, Trump 48, because that just the favorite demographically, it just favors her. However, if my turnout is wrong on that model, and I'm not accounting for a heavy Republican environment, which I'm not counting for a Republican environment, then that the electorate model will be wrong, and I fully admit that. The more data I get, I may be able to make some adjustments and see. But right now, it's showing about a 2-point race. It fluctuates. It just depends on what kind of data I'm putting in. But I have not used some of the more recent national polling that came out this week showing it +1 or even. I think New York Times saying it had it even. So, yeah, there's some more work to be done. I look forward to updating the rest. But yeah, so this was a great conversation, man. I know I'm going to try to cut it loose here. We said we're going to knock it, put an hour on the board, and we're at about that point. I think we've hit a lot of topics here. We can be try to play Nostradamus as much as we want and much as we can, but we are in for a very interesting election. There are some things here that just aren't adding up. We'll see if that translates to Election Day. But you said that early voting starts October.
I think the 16th in North Carolina, which is going to be a big day. Yeah.
Okay. I definitely need to bookmark that. I want to. I want to be tracking that and see where that's at, because I'm gonna even do some more work on North Carolina and looking at the nexus or the lotus or the whatever between North Carolina and Pennsylvania. There is a trend that's very new and recent. It's probably not very useful because it's only been a few times, but going back to like 2008, if a Democrat gets over 48% in North Carolina, typically has a good election. Obama won it in 2008. Hillary Clinton, Obama got 48. He won it in 2008, got over 48, got like 48.28, 48.4. He ends up losing it, but he had a good election. Clinton gets below 48%, has a bad election. Biden gets 48.6%, has a good election. So we'll see if that
Yeah.
that trend continues. But typically when they get 48%, they tend to have a good election. So we'll see. But there's a lot here to unpack, a lot here to discuss. We'll try to do this again maybe in October.
Yeah, definitely.
And we'll run some more of these out. I'm supposed to meet with Rasmussen Reports next week, and we might do one of these as well. So, but Eric, man, I appreciate you being here. This was a great conversation. I look forward to releasing this and posting it, see what other people think about it. But we had some good conversations, man. And I really do thank you for your time, and I'll see you on Twitter.
Yeah, all right, man. I appreciate you having me on. We can definitely come back and talk about where things are at. We got a lot of mail to track. We got in-person voting to track. And we got about a month and a week, I think, until the election, a month and 10 days or something like that. So
we're close.
We'll have to see if these trends that we talked about, who knows, maybe in 30 days or 28 days, everything evens out and maybe we're back to square one and we're like, we have no idea how election day is going to go because the mail evened out and oh my God, it's just like 2020 again, or it's halfway. There are so many things that could happen and we will see.
We will see, man. All right, bud. Well, happy hunting. We'll see you. Have a great evening.
You too.
All right, man.
All right.
All right, bye.
Yeah.